girls are disempowered from such a young age to become disconnected with their cycle, to ignore it, to basically just try not to get pregnant. It's kind of like the lingo for a lot of the time.
That's it.
You know,
Wild Rose! Wild Rose!
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Wild Roads podcast, conversations about how we don't do stuff normal. We have Elizabeth Sargent back with us again for another episode. We're so excited. Hi, Liz!
yes, hello. Oh my goodness, it's so exciting to be back.
Oh my gosh, we had the greatest conversation with Elizabeth last time that she was here. So it was only a few episodes ago too.
Yeah, it wasn't far.
It wasn't far back in the archives. Definitely go check out that episode if you have not listened to that one already.
Brilliant.
We talked about all things hormones and health and money and like building businesses and reverse aging and like all of the things. It was an epic episode.
There was a lot
there. We did cover so much. Oh my goodness.
We did. And we have got Liz back to talk about more of a deep dive into an area that we're going to jump into very, very soon. But before we do, you know the drill. We've got awkward question time.
I'm still recovering after last time.
All right. So we picked a different question this time.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
And so the question is, what is the strangest food combination you eat or that you ate as like a kid?
One that I eat really regularly now, which I don't know so for me it's not strange.
Yeah.
And for some people it isn't, but it probably was strange for me before I did it.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with tahini, and I love tahini on banana.
Oh, yeah, yum. I do that too.
Do you do that? So some people do, but other people are like, hang on a second.
Never tried
It's savory. It's in a salad dressing. I really love that combination.
It's good, isn't it? I like it, but I do it with cottage cheese sometimes, like on a rice cake.
So cottage cheese and tahini.
So yeah, and then bananas on top.
Oh, and then bananas on top.
Oh, all of it.
Ooh, Shauna, you are wild. I feel like this is the Wild Road podcast.
Just put it all in there. What a cracker.
I'm very weird like that.
Layer it up.
I like that. I'm so glad I met someone else that loves that. That's cool.
So good. I also really like it in porridge, in oatmeal. So my son has it he has buckwheat oatmeal pretty much every morning, and it's really good in there with a little bit of honey. Kind of nutty flavour.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to have to try this. I never thought of doing that.
Oh, it's
That's
so
interesting.
It's like taking the whole peanut butter on banana or like apple and stuff, just to a slightly different level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Shona got my daughter onto peanut butter and apple slices because it was, I don't know, it was a while back, and I was talking to Shona on the phone, and Harper came in and was complaining that she wanted food and everything, and didn't know what to eat. And Shona offered apple slices with peanut butter, and she was like, "What?" And she's like, "Do you like peanut butter?" And she's like, "Yeah." "Do you like apple?" "Yeah." She's like, "It's so good together." And the first time she tried it, she was like, "This is strange." And now she has it all the time. She's like,
really?
Yeah.
There you go.
And it's the best. I feel so good giving it to her because it's like the natural peanut butter and an apple. I'm like,
so good.
So good.
Has she done it as little donuts yet? So if you core the apple and slice it so they're like rings, and then you can put the peanut butter on the little donut ring and then put another slice on top, and it's like a little donut peanut butter apple sandwich. It's cute for kids. Really cute.
I would have to try that with her.
That's brilliant.
And maybe a bit of cinnamon too.
Oh, Indiana is going to love that. She's 18 and she will be doing that, I bet you. Wow, that's cool.
I love that.
Not so strange after all, really, is it? The combination.
No. Yeah. What about you, Paula?
Okay, so mine's not so healthy, But like I have two really strange food combinations that I didn't actually think were that strange, but people are like, this is really strange. One I actually did not so long ago because I actually had pasta like only the other day. Shona was talking about pasta last week, and I'm like, that's it. I need some pasta because I hadn't eaten it in so long.
I don't talk about food all the time, by the way.
No. I hadn't, because I've been kind of mostly gluten-free, just having a little bit every now and then. And pasta just seems like one of those ones that I was just like, it's an easy no for me because I don't really like I'm not obsessed with pasta.
Yeah.
And I don't really like bolognese. I don't know. I'm strange like that. But I do use one of my staples as a teenager. And I used to make it all of the time. And I actually made it the other night because I made bolognese for everybody else. And I was like, oh, what am I going to have? And it's so bad. It's so not healthy at all. But it's like I had the spaghetti in the bowl. And then I got a big dollop of like sour cream and mixed it in. And then sprinkled cheese on top. I was like, if I'm going to like eat shit food, I'm going to eat shit food.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And then I grill it under the grill so the cheese goes crusty on top. It's like the most delicious thing in the world.
Oh my gosh. That is...
My husband was like, what are you doing? That is gross. Like, put something in it. Like, that's so plain. And I'm like, no, it's so good. And I ate it. I'm obsessed with sour cream though, but like, I was like, this is bringing me back to like my teen years or like my early adulthood after I just moved out of home and I didn't really know how to cook properly. And I was like, I'll just eat pasta and sour cream.
Sour cream. I'm so going to try it one day when I want to have a coma from all the lactose.
I want to have a coma.
I did not feel great afterwards.
Oh,
after somebody who's like, you know, pretty much cut out dairy and gluten from this diet, I ate it. I was like, oh.
Oh, wow.
Like, how did I eat this all the time? This is terrible.
I know. I had a funny pasta incident recently. So we went out for dinner to an Italian restaurant. And usually I'd have like the sea bass or whatever. And I was like, you know what? I quite fancy some gluten-free pasta. So I was like, I'm going to order it. It was the most disappointing meal.
Yeah.
It was in front of me and I was looking at it going, this doesn't really have much flavour. I did a bolognese and the bolognese sauce was nice, but it was just full of bland pasta.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is it. I'm now 100% over it. It was very disappointing, but actually also kind of like, pasta. You're overrated.
Yeah.
Flavors out there.
Yeah.
It is very bland. Like,
it is.
I don't know whether, like, when you're younger, it's like bland foods are just, they taste amazing. But then as you get older, your palate matures and you find like really amazing food. And then you eat the pasta and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
It's like
I think that's what it is.
Like it just fills you up.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about you, Shona?
Overrated.
There's some weirdness.
Oh, this is very weird. And this is owed to my grandfather because my pop, Abby, he used to have this all the time. And as a kid, I'd look at him and go, what are you doing? But then I'd taste it and I've just used to have it after school all the time. And even in my 20s, I would have it because I just had this, you know, when you feel like the sweet and the sour hit at the same time. So it's lettuce cut up, like shredded, with lemon juice over it, sprinkled with sugar.
Oh.
It's
What?
How did you even discover that?
My pop, he used to always sprinkle sugar, like a whole tablespoon on his Wheat Bix or his Wheaties and stuff. So sugar went on everything. Like he lived to a beautiful old age. Like old age, but yeah, it's just like you get this hit of this sourness of the lemon, but it's a little bit sweet and it makes you look at Paula's like,
Oh, I can't. Lettuce and sugar.
I told you I was weird.
My sister-in-law made us. Okay, when we traveled to Australia, we stayed with my sister-in-law for a few nights, and she made us eat banana sugar sandwiches. I didn't know they were a thing, but apparently that's like an old like thing that people used to do. You get like the slice of bread and you put the banana on it. The butter, you had to have butter, then banana. That's weird.
Yeah.
And then you'd sprinkle it with sugar. And she's like, "It's so good." And she served it to us, and me and Brenda took a bite and we're like,
Ooh.
so gross. But I was like, if I was a kid, I probably would have gone, "Oh, this is amazing."
Yeah.
I used to take that to school for lunch.
Really?
I did.
Gross.
Hence, I've got to go to Liz for some health advice in my 40s. Funny.
Well, I guess it's a step up from jam sandwiches.
Oh, yeah.
You know, at least got the banana in it.
Well, that's it. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All good.
There's probably
Lots of good stuff in a banana.
That's true. It's probably just less sugar than in jam.
But then you've just you've just lathered butter and bread and sugar on it. It's like, why even bother eating the banana?
That's
It is a dessert.
Good
Strange dessert.
Good
Oh
time.
my gosh. There's so many weird things people eat. That was a good one. Thank you. Thank you for coming on again, Elizabeth. We're so excited to dive into today's topic. We really wanted to have you on and have this conversation. We saw a live stream that you did over on Facebook not so long ago, a few weeks ago. And as soon as I watched it, I was in your inbox saying, "Can you please come on to the Wild Roads podcast and talk about this?" Because this was something that I hadn't really thought about. I'd thought about in other contexts, but within the context that you had talked about in this live stream, I was like, oh, I hadn't actually thought about it like that before. So the topic that we're going to be diving into is menstrual cycles and what that means for young girls at school when it comes to times of, doing your final exams and even just throughout the year, and you have to do presentations and, deliver reports and things like that. And what that feels like or what can happen in a cycle that might mean that then becomes a very extenuous or a more difficult thing for a girl to do when she's at a certain time in her cycle.
Yeah. So this came up. So basically, when you watched the video, so it was probably about 4 weeks ago now. It was in the UK. The kids were doing their GCSEs, which is the exams that they do when they're 16, and then their A levels, which are exams they do when they're 18, and then they'll go on to either employment or college, university. And it was coming up with a conversation with one of my friends who her daughter was doing her A levels. And first of all, we were having a conversation about how, firstly, the whole examination system and the whole schooling system, we had that conversation about how crazy it is that these kids have worked so incredibly hard for, the whole school career, but definitely the last 2 years and then 4 years as they've gone through these different through the GCSEs and A levels, and how it's all then just pinned on 2 hours of time, or maybe 2 hours of time across a few different exams, to see their performance in an exam environment. This being able to regurgitate a whole load of, quite frankly, when we go into the real world, random knowledge. When I reflect back on some of the stuff that I did in my A levels, definitely not required for my role of work. Differentiation I did in A level maths, but you'd be able to regurgitate this stuff in that exam environment, and then that kind of determines potentially which university you go to, etc. And particularly for the kids, when they're in it, it obviously feels so important, so incredibly stressful, and it's all on this, which is never mimicked again in the real world.
Although
so we were talking we were talking about how crazy the whole situation is and how much pressure is put on them, and actually they do have this belief that that's then going to determine their success in life, which again, once you've come out the other side, you realize it doesn't play that amount of influence on what you can achieve and become in the world. But so we were talking about that, and then we just went on to the conversations around particularly girls. So obviously that affects boys and girls, but particularly young women who at 16 or 18 their menstrual cycles are still finding their groove. And if you think of an exam period is going to be probably between 6 and 8 weeks, depending on what exams they're doing. So during that time, they're probably going to have at least one, depending on how long their cycle is. And at that age, their cycle could be up to, potentially still up to maybe 60 days. So they'll have at least one, if not two, cycles and two periods. And what really isn't considered is, for a lot of women, as grown women, we experience symptoms around our cycle, PMS around our cycle. And I know we sort of touched on this a little bit last time. We can go on about it in a bit. We can talk about it in a bit, how so many of those symptoms are very common, but they're not normal. Now, when we sort of reverse time, when we go back to being 16 and 18, some of these symptoms are very real. And actually, they're very much our body's still trying to find their communication pathways. Our pituitary gland in our brain is still communicating with our ovaries. Things are going to be a little bit clunky as those hormonal pathways are finding their flow. And there will be fluctuations that our bodies are still getting used to. So yeah, there will be things that you can do in your teens to help make that maybe not as extreme. But yeah, the young girls are going to be experiencing significant hormonal shifts during that exam period. And that could include things like anxiety. Now, heightened anxiety is already a time of anxiety. So heightened anxiety, low mood, feelings of irritability and anger, pain, actual physical period pain. Heavy periods are very common at that age. And like I say, heavy periods in adulthood are common but not normal. But at that age, there are still things that are trying to find their groove, as I said. So for young women doing exams at 16 or 18, having to go and sit exams and experience, do their best, perform their best, is there is such a disadvantage. Because we know as women that when you're not feeling great, and it may be the days just before your period, it could be whilst you're on your period, a lot of women suffer with headaches as they experiencing the dip in the hormones. Imagine having to sort of pull yourself together, get all this knowledge on top of all the pressure and stress that I've got this exam, and your brain chemistry is already working in potentially the wrong zone to be creative in that, to be your best performance. And then on top of that, you've got pain, you've got a headache. So we were just talking about how the whole exam system, whilst it's perhaps not the best measure, is massively disadvantaging our young women and girls right from that early age. And it was just, for me, when I was talking to my friend, and then as I sort of sat with it afterwards, it was like the injustice of that. And we're starting to see more and more come in the workplace, and as women, mainly, particularly in the UK, go into perimenopause and menopause, there's a lot more awareness around that, and they're starting to become a lot more understanding about that in workplaces, and companies are putting sort of measures in place and policies in place to support women. But for the girls, I've never heard anyone have that conversation. But for them, it's such a vulnerable time in their life.
Absolutely.
It's very
and it's not like you're going to put your hand up and go, Miss, I've got my period.
This is the thing.
It's so embarrassing because you get made fun of by the boys, and it's not something that your body's going through so many changes already. It's not a time to be like, okay, so who's got their period today? All right, you can it's going to be such a there's so much sensitivity around this. We don't want young girls to feel ashamed, but at the same time, you don't want to single them out either and make it feel like, I find this conversation so it's so necessary to have, and things do need to shift and change, because I remember doing exams, and I was actually remembering this the other day because I knew we were bringing you on to talk about this, and I was really thinking back to my final exams, and I can't remember if it was the ones when I was 16 or the ones when I was 18, but I do remember I did need to go to the bathroom like in the middle of that 2-hour thing. And they make such a deal about you leaving the exam room, like you're not supposed to do it. And I remember I was just like, but I have to. And like the teacher stood outside the bathroom stall to make sure that I wasn't cheating. And I'm like, I need to go to the bathroom. Like, this isn't. And like what you said, like, my periods used to be really heavy and they used to be super
Yeah.
painful, and I used to get migraines as well. So
Mhm.
it's just, it's really a, when you really think about it, you're like, kids shouldn't be tested at all. Like,
No,
there's no reasonable way to
exactly.
do that in that kind of environment, especially
Yeah.
if you're going to take on, schooling as a career. And now I've left my school and I'm about to go, do whatever's next. Why is the mark only made up of that exam time?
Yeah.
And you've just been doing that most of your life. You've been in the classroom and doing things
Yes.
and showing up every day and doing the work, like what you say
Yeah.
in business. But like, it's so it does, it seems backwards that you then put kids under this really high pressure situation to perform. And even if you're not, on your period, or even if you're a boy at that age,
Mm.
being in that high pressure situation, and if there's if you've got your heart set on, okay, once I leave school, I'm going to go study this at university because I want to be a scientist, or I want to be a certain type of
Yeah.
doctor or a surgeon or whatever it is, and you're then, the anxiety levels around, well, I have to get a certain grade in order to be able to
Yeah.
do that. Sometimes the most, genius kids who are very intellectual and great at school can buckle under that pressure. And then it's like,
Yeah.
well, I just went through all of that school,
Yeah.
tried
Right.
my best, knew I was smart, got to the final exam, and like anxiety got the better of me because it was just, the pressure was too much. And now I can't go and do what I wanted to do.
Yeah. I think they have, like, in Australia now, like they have like a different score system now than what we had when we went. But but like, to make it a little bit fairer, that it does go over the year, and I don't completely understand how they do it. Indiana, my daughter, is in year 12 now and has decided she's not going to university. So she doesn't actually have to do, she's going to pass year 12 to get her VCE. So she has a certificate that she's, done the schooling. So she doesn't actually have to get the score, which is called the
Yeah.
ATAR, to get into university. So she sits the exams and fails them. It doesn't matter. She still passes. But the kids that do want to go into university need to get the score. And I'm like, thank goodness for Indy. Like, she's had a really bad year with lethargy and just like with her periods, just
Mhm.
so tired, like dragging her feet,
Yeah.
like cannot think, like emotional, drop of the hat, like, I don't know what's wrong, but I just can't stop crying,
Yeah.
and I'm like,
Yeah.
we actually got an extension last week for her. She had to do an oral presentation, but she was sick and COVID symptoms, even though it was negative, but it was COVID symptoms, so she couldn't go and do it. They had an allowance for an extension for that, but they don't have an allowance because if you're having your period, that you can't have an extension unless you get a doctor's certificate. So you got to go to the doctor and tell him that, you can't function. So that, or her, and that's when, yes, you can. So it's very like, wow. And I'm not just going to the, like, teenagers, right? They get it. Like, they're just like, I'm not going to the doctor for just because I've got my period. Why should I have to? So it's really, really like this. There needs to be allowances for this because they are so disadvantaged. That one test of 2 hours that could have got them, that makes a difference between you've made the ATAR to get into that course to you've just missed out by a point.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And just like what you're describing there for Indy, if she was going into that exam time, feeling really kind of low and tired and fatigued, she's not going to be there on it to be able to answer the questions.
No.
And I think actually listen to, I believe, what I understood that in the UK, the exams have become more exam focused and they've gone away from coursework. And I might be, it will probably depend on subjects, but I know from talking to my friend, most of her daughters' marks were purely on the exams. There wasn't any. And I know when I was at school, there was some coursework as well.
Yeah.
Although I think that depended, perhaps not in maths so much. But anyway, it probably does depend slightly on the subjects. But it is crazy. But I think a lot of it all comes back down to how it is introduced at a younger age. And obviously some of that, a huge amount of that responsibility falls to us as mothers as well, and how we talk about our cycles and how open we are and how we celebrate them. And that's one of the big things that, is my, quest and mission in life, is to bring women to reconnect with their bodies, reconnect with their cycles, and be able to really attune into what our bodies are telling us, so that we can then pass it on to the next generation. But then there's also so much responsibility from a societal point of view and from school point of view as to how periods and how the whole menstrual cycle is talked about at school. Because just like you say, you don't want people to know that you're on your period because it's embarrassing, but it shouldn't be something that's embarrassing. And if there was much open conversation around what the gifts of the cycle are, actually what is happening, it's not dirty. And I think so much girls are disempowered from such a young age to become disconnected with their cycle, to ignore it, to basically just try not to get pregnant. It's kind of like the lingo for a lot of the time.
That's it.
They're not empowered to understand why they're experiencing the symptoms. Like you were saying, Paula, you had heavy periods at that age. And what a lot of girls have then done is, okay, well, we can fix that. We'll just put you on the pill.
Which I did.
And that's not actually fixing it.
No.
That's just overriding it. And quite often, if it, girls go on it at a too younger age, they then, when you come off it maybe in your 20s or 30s, your body still needs to figure out its communication channels that it didn't get to figure out in your teens. And then it can become quite cumbersome at that stage in your life. And then a lot of women go, this isn't good, I'll go back on it again. And then, but the pill in its own right has huge issues for a lot of women around depression and anxiety, and all sorts of symptoms and side effects aren't even talked about. So that in itself, whilst in one hand it may lift the symptoms of heavy periods or of headaches, but it adds another issue. And actually, when I was just saying it lifts symptoms of headaches, I know I was put on the pill in my teens for acne, and the pill-free headaches were horrendous. I just couldn't operate. So actually, in one respect, it fixes one thing, but it makes something else a whole lot worse.
I went on so many different ones. It was like every few months I would, whenever I had to go, whenever I had to go back and get another prescription done, because, you'd have it for a certain amount of time, then you got to go back to the doctor and go, I run out of my script, and she'd do the check-in. It would be like, oh, I'm on this one, so now I'm experiencing these side effects. Okay, I don't really like those. All right, let's try a different one. And it was kind of like this lucky dip of like, oh, this one gives you this.
goodness.
Okay, but let's try this one and see what happens. And it was like this back and forth of like just being an experiment, so to speak. And it was like you'd go on one and my boobs would grow 2 sizes. And when I was like a size 10 or a size 8 at that age with E-cup breasts, how do you even find a bra that size? Because you can't. It was like I would have to go to like the fancy lingerie shops and spend like $90 to $100 as like, a young adult who used pretty much all of her money to like buy food and pay rent and all that sort of stuff, to then go buy a bra that actually fitted me. And then I'd go on to another one, and maybe that would make my breasts get smaller again. But then I'd start to get really bad headaches, like what you said. And it's like, okay, go
Yeah.
back again and we'll try this. And it was like, kind of like we couldn't really find one that helped but didn't have another side effect that I was just like, no, I can't
Yeah.
deal with that either.
Yeah. And it just, I mean, it does just break my heart that there's that rush to, well, let's just kind of make everything better by putting a band-aid on top, which is the pill. But at no point are we talking to the young girls around, well, why have you got a heavy period right now? Okay, well, let's see what we can do for those 2, maybe 3 days of every month to support you with that, because actually the rest of the month is fine.
Yeah.
It's just when the period comes, what can we do to support you during that time? What can we do in school to support you? What can we do at home to support you? Maybe on those days you work remotely. And now, that sort of schooling is totally possible. Maybe you can work remotely if, again, it depends on if you've got parents who can be at home during those times. But there's so many options, but I really feel like those questions aren't being asked.
Yeah.
And just to be able to empower the girls from the age of 12 to know how to move and lead themselves through their monthly cycle. Just imagine how that generation would grow up and how things would look so, so different.
Oh, for sure. Like, just that feeling of shame. Like, I remember my daughter at 12 and just like, Mum, can you just pretend I'm really sick and I can't go to swimming this week because I don't want to, I don't want to go swimming. While I'm on my period. And it's just like, and the female teachers were like, well, just, you can do any sport while you've got your period. You can do anything, just use tampons. Trying to tell a 12-year-old girl that that's an option, they're like, no, like that's no, my body's not ready for that. They're not ready for that.
Yeah.
But some of them, like some are, like some are more mature, some are more like it doesn't worry them. But for others, it's just like, no. And at 17, it's still the same. No, I don't want, like, that's not what I want to put in my body. So it's like, there's a lot of pressure for them to turn up, to show up, to push through, to go play that netball grand final, which, that's a choice too by, their own thing. But it's like understanding how, like what you just said, understanding how you can support yourself through that and still do the things you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting what you were just saying there about actually sport and netball, now we can, I don't know if you're getting this in the kind of some of the female sports leaders in Australia, but in the UK and I know in the US, particularly the US soccer team, they train aligned with their cycles.
Really?
So each of them as an individual train specifically throughout the month to get the most out of their fitness, out of the metabolism, out of their muscles, out of their agility and stamina based on where they are in their cycle and what the hormones are doing and how it's utilizing glucose and storing protein and the metabolism. And as a team, they then come together and then very strategically plan the matches based on where people are, women are in their cycles. And that's one of the reasons that they attribute to them having the extra, 1% as to why they won the Women's World Cup. The UK, the British team are now starting to do that. Jessica Ellis-Hill, who's one of our Olympians, she's talking a lot now how she's now retired, but she's talking a lot about how she does train around her cycle and how she wished she'd understood that while she was training for a lot of her Olympics. So there's so much more coming around, and that's amazing because you've got those role models there for young girls. So there is a lot we can do, but we need to start supporting them at a young age, but also being understanding that at that young age, at the age of 12, 14, 16, our cycles are still clunky. So it's no good just saying you can go swimming and, use a tampon. Well, like you say, first of all, some girls just, using a tampon just isn't even an option. And actually for some girls, their period might be very heavy. Actually at that point. So a tampon isn't going to be supportive.
No.
So it's just having the understanding and the compassion to help them lead themselves as to what, because then also there's this self-confidence, because there's a lot of the body changes happening as well, right?
Yeah.
So it's just giving them that safe space to connect to the body, because as soon as we start forcing things on people and saying, well, you should be able to do this, that's when you become disconnected.
Yeah.
Like, well, I don't think I can. My body can't do that. I don't feel comfortable doing that in my body.
Yeah.
And then that's where the disconnection starts.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's starting at such a young age.
Early on, isn't it? It is.
Yeah.
There's so much pressure to keep doing what everybody, like, to keep up and just to keep going and just to show up and do all the things. And I know this hasn't, I haven't experienced this personally, but I do know women that this has happened to, and especially as girls, is the, you know, the whole competitive sport, and like really finding a sport that you're really into, and you're like, okay, cool. So I know, you know, some of my friends were really into gymnastics or aerobics or, you know, even swimming or other, you know, really competitive sports where they would go and compete and they would train really, really hard for. And that actually can mess up your cycle in that you don't get it anymore because you've reached a certain, I think it's to do with the body fat or something of the body. So even understanding that, so that girls don't go through that, well, I haven't had my period in a while because I train so hard, but I love what I do. And I'm afraid that if I stop training, then I'm not going to be able to compete at the level that I'm competing now, or I'm not going to get better. And so that's another side to it as well, is like the disconnection from the body, like actually understanding how your body works and at what age, what is happening, so you can support yourself to enjoy the sports that you want to be doing and train in the way that you want to, but also understand how you can do that so your body is healthy and it's functioning and speaking to each other inside of there, instead of shutting down because you're not actually, you know, you're putting your body under stress when it didn't really need to be under that stress.
It's and that becomes a pattern, because when you start doing that at a young age, it just transitions into adulthood around pushing yourself at work and not listening to your body, doing late nights, burning the candle at both ends. And whether that's turning up with regards to PMS or monthly symptoms, or it's turning up in autoimmune conditions or headaches or just low mood or feeling overwhelmed and stressed, we're kind of, it's like as if it's being trained into us at a young age to just keep working hard. You can do it until, you know, you like slam, actually I can't do this anymore. Whereas if we start engaging at a young age and supporting, just like you were saying, Paula, you know, helping that connection with body and being able to perform, if it's sports or if it's, you know, it could be work, it could be anything that you're performing at a high level, having this incredible relationship with body and, you know, environment, what it is that we're doing, then that can then lead us into such a different place into adulthood, rather than having, you know, a population of burnt out, disconnected women who then, you know, as we go into perimenopause, do hit huge brick walls because you've got less flexibility in the hormones to help support and prop us up. And it starts right back at that young age. But we can do things as well in the meantime to support the younger.
So this is where it's just like, so where do we go? What do we, you know, what are the resources? Where do we find out the information? Obviously, you don't want to be bombarded from the whole world because, you know, coming into your DMs. But where can young girls that are listening to this, that maybe in their 20s and going, oh, this is like, I don't even know where to start with this?
There's some good books. So Period Power by Maisie, I can't remember her surname. She has a good book, Period Power. It depends how you want to take the information in. So there are some good books out there, kind of like Period Power. I can drop you them and you can put them in the show notes.
We can put them in the show notes. That's fine.
That's cool. I have a membership called FemFlow that goes through all of this. It's a kind of a low cost membership, so kind of access for everyone. And that has a lot of information around how to move through your cycle, how to harmonize your cycle, how to eat to support your cycle, how to exercise to support your cycle. So that takes you through so much of first of all, the attunement. Like the first thing actually that I would recommend for anyone to do is the attunement. So just start tracking your cycle. Start noticing the little nuances that change one day for the next as you move through your cycle. Whether your cycle is 25 days or 35 days, any sort of length of time during that, as long as that's sort of broadly what it is each month, then that's your sort of cycle length. But start tracking it, because you will see these fluctuations from energy, from performance, from like a gym perspective, performance at work, creativity, immune system shifts at different times of cycle. So just start tracking what day of the cycle you're on, how you felt within yourself from a mood perspective, from an anxiety perspective, from an overwhelm perspective. How did you feel from an energy perspective? How was your digestion? Have you got a cold? And soon you start, as you do this over the months, the information that suddenly starts to jump out and the patterns that you see is absolutely just mind-blowing. If you start recognizing, actually, I'm getting ill just before my period every month. Okay, well, we can see that something's going on with your immune system, and then we need to support it with this, and this. So the first part is really that attunement. Then you move into harmonizing, so you can start to see what you need to do, and then you go into the kind of the alignment phase, and then you can move into embodiment. And that's basically the flow that we go through in FemFlow. But just tracking that and then starting to tune in and then making changes. So how you exercise at different times of the month based on how you feel and what comes up with you. And then you can start to learn a bit more about how your body metabolizes glucose and builds muscle differently at different times of the month. How you lead yourself in the workplace, and this for young girls at school, how you lead yourself at school at different times of the month. The first half of your month, you're going to be more creative. You're going to be more confident and outward. You're going to be more social. And then as you move into second part of the month, you're potentially going to be a little bit more analytical, more reflective, perhaps not quite as social. And in starting to even recognize those patterns in yourself, you can then start actually planning your diary. So you've got the first half of your month where you're like, oh, let's have a party. Everyone come to my house. Let's do this. Or, oh, let's present this amazing, great idea that I've just had. We'll present it to the board. Let's put it in the diary for 2 weeks' time. That will give us enough time to plan the party or to put the idea together and plan the presentation. Well, what phase in your cycle are you going to be in 2 weeks' time?
Yeah.
You're going to be in the second half. You're going to be in a time where you're not as out confident, you're not as outgoing. You might be more analytical. So the way that you present yourself to the board is going to be different to what you did in the first half. You're probably not going to want to go to that social event, or you're just not feeling the love for it as you were 2 weeks earlier. And then you start to kind of, until you have this awareness, you can then get into this cycle of sort of beating yourself up. So, oh, what's wrong with me? I can really do this. I know I can, but it just feels so heavy. Or why don't I want to see my friends today? But when you start to have an awareness of these flows, then you're like, that's what it is. And you can just be then so much loving about yourself. And you think, you know what? I'm going to plan that party for 3 weeks' time. Or I'm going to plan it for this time next month. Or just next week, because next week I'm still going to be on top, like razzly dazzly form, right? So you can then really just take control and power over your life and your schedule and your talents.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's my enthusiastic. Just start tracking.
And
once you start getting this information, then you can start using it, and then it becomes really, really powerful.
I think that's just that like really sparked something inside of me. But also when you said about nourishment, like what you eat, and what just dropped in on me is just like how many of us as teenagers watched all the sitcoms, watched all the movies, And period time, you're sitting on the couch with a big bucket of ice cream and you're getting all the chocolate and you're just going like that. Obviously, I don't know whether that's just like a sugar craving thing at a certain time or whether it's actually just conditioned into us that that's what we do. And, like anyone, do we feel like shit? I don't know. But like, there's a point in time for my periods is that I had diarrhea at the same time. Like it was a symptom, and that was like a whole day of feeling like that and awful in my stomach. And I think this is important. Like what foods, how can we nourish our bodies during that time and be empowered to make things, to source things, to be prepared for that time.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So if just being prepared, like if you know that you have sugar cravings at a certain time of the month, be prepared with kind of healthier versions. So I have a paleo tiffin recipe. I can share that so you can share it in your show notes as well.
Nice.
Because I'm like, give me all the chocolate. I can always tell because my husband, he always, every night he makes me a cup of tea after he puts the kids to bed. It's his little ritual. And sometimes he's like, do you want something with your tea? And like, if I say, give me all the chocolate we have, I'm like, oh, it's coming.
Yes. Yep. Totally.
Yeah. But you can make then just different choices, and also just observing that, because what you can do is preempt that happening. So if that's something that happens every month, you can preempt that happening and actually change things in your diet or in your routine or in your environment the week before or the 2 weeks before, because all of those little signals are telling you that something else might be right. So for example, quite often extreme sugar cravings or chocolate cravings might be a magnesium deficiency, and to be honest, most people do have a magnesium deficiency. And as you move through that second half of your cycle, where our stress hormone cortisol is just slightly raised, and that in itself will influence how our blood sugar balances. So there's this biological reason why you may crave more sugar, and also there is a slight increase in calorific need in that second half of your cycle. So if you're not aware of that, and for a lot of women who might be dieting, they're trying to restrict calories, and their body's like, but no, we need a little bit more right now. Like, no, and they're just really finding it hard in that second half of the cycle. And then as you go through, if you've got estrogen dominant challenges, that will then throw things out and other symptoms will start coming up. But if you start to plot and track what's happening, and you can start to see this is happening, you can think, right, what could I introduce around ovulation or just after ovulation to help ease some of these symptoms as I go into that later part of my cycle and through my period? What could I do to stop getting headaches during my period? There's a lot you can do to stop getting headaches. Those headaches women get as their hormones are really low whilst we're having our period or just after our period, can be lifted really quickly if we're very proactive in eating phytoestrogens in that second half, at the second half of our luteal phase. And women will be like one cycle in, they'll be like, well, I didn't get a headache. And
what is this witchcraft that we're doing?
This is called a white witch before. It is, but it is like that. We can hugely influence these symptoms just by changing things that we're eating. It's amazing.
It's blowing my mind that we're born women, and by a certain age we get our periods, and a lot of us don't even know what you're talking about. Like we just go through it like every month and just go, oh, yep, that's what we do.
And we pretend that we don't have it because nobody likes to talk about it. And we can't let anybody know that we are, because, it's shameful, and like you could be teased, or you could be, like even adults make fun of, women on their period. Oh no, it's Shark Week. Oh, she's here it is. Like, and it's really bad, because you're like, well, like, this is something that is very natural. None of us would be here without it.
Exactly.
And we make it like it's a joke. Like, it's been turned into a joke and something that we shouldn't be celebrating. It should be hidden, not spoken about, just something that happens in the background. And I absolutely loved what you just shared about tracking, because the question I was going to ask is, my daughter is 8, so in a few years' time, I don't know when it's going to be, but in a few years' time, she's going to get her period. And it's like, what can I do? Because I know for me, it was a very awkward time. I didn't want to talk about it because I felt like nobody really made it easy to talk about. And I just kind of fumbled around and figured it out on my own because it felt like something I couldn't ask people questions about. I didn't feel comfortable doing it. It felt awkward. It felt like, all of those things. And I know so many of my friends were like that as well. And I really want to help my daughter not feel ashamed about it. Ask me any of the questions that she wants to, even though I probably will be like, oh my God, this is so awkward to talk about because of my own experience. But the whole tracking, I was just getting a visual of like, how beautiful is it as mother and daughter to track your cycles together and get like have a special planner that or diary or calendar or whatever and go, okay, this is our space and we're going to track it and we're going to see how it flows for us, what we feel like, what's going on, and really have it be like an open conversation and something that we do together. And I was like, that feels really amazing. Like, how beautiful is that?
It is.
That would be gorgeous. And also because then you're opening up the conversation for when they're having angsty days or they don't know why they feel sad. You're opening that conversation up every day to as something that's normal, something that's very, very normalized. And I think that my daughter's 6, and I'm just starting to just make her aware of cycles, because it's kind of like, when do you start talking about reproduction as well and all of those sides of things? Because then the questions I have already, I did make this mistake. I don't know if it was a mistake, but she does occasionally still ask about the eggs inside her. But I think she was about, she may have been 4, but she hadn't started school. And she did ask me the question about, how do babies get into tummies and that sort of thing. And I sort of did the whole thing. Mummies and daddies decide they want to have a baby, and then we decide to have a baby. She's like, but how to get it? I was like, well, and I can't remember how it came up, but I said, well, we've got women have little eggs inside them. And she was like, oh, okay. Do I have eggs inside me? I said, of course you have little eggs inside of you. Well, that just blew her mind. I'm like, the questions that came after that. And I'm like, what have I done?
No,
I've gone down this rabbit hole. How did the eggs get there? Well, what do I do with the eggs?
Are they going to break?
A little too young to introduce. But I think making it a very normal, everyday type of conversation around where mummy's period comes, and start talking about, maybe where mummy is in her cycle and what the cycle is. I think if we're really open in our own homes about it, then it will just be just that regular, well, oh, right, well, it's not a funny thing to talk about. We talk about it all the time. And I guess there will come a point, so, obviously I haven't been through that yet, but there might come a point when they start to realize other people potentially don't talk about it quite as openly. But as long, like what you're talking about, and as long as they feel confident in their body and with what's happening to them, and they're attuning to that, I think that is what's most important, and that's what's setting them up. And then they can take their self-leadership and then have confidence in themselves and their body, rather than having doubt in it, which is what happens when we have the disempowerment, right? You go to school and a teacher says, well, of course you can do hockey because da 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 da. If you've really installed this awareness and the self-confidence and the self-knowing, it's actually, you know what, no, I can't, because I don't feel that I'm it's not the right time for me to do hockey today, or this month for whatever reason is actually a much heavier flow than normal, because months change, different from month to month, and particularly even as adults they do, but particularly for children, like I said, because of the communication channels, the hormones are still finding their place. So I think what you've just described, Paula, would be absolutely magical.
It is.
Thank you for that.
Mm.
It's such a beautiful thing. I've already started talking to my daughter about it a little bit more because she's already having, you know, big emotional outbursts, and I'll sit with her and we'll work through it, and then once we come out the other side of it, because I'm sitting there, I'm like, I don't even know what brought this on, and I'm like,
Yeah.
trying to be like, okay, well, was it this, was it that, and trying to sit with her and figure it out, and then we get to the end and she's like, I ask her what happened, and she's like, I don't know, I'm just sad. I
Yeah.
just feel really
Yeah.
sad. Like
Yeah.
it really surprised me. I'm like, oh, like they already, she's already going through a cycle, and I noticed that it does come in waves. Like she'll have a few days where she'll say things like that, and she'll just have these, huge emotional outbursts, and then at the end of it, she's like, I just don't know. I'm just tired, Mum, and I don't know, and I just feel sad.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just really, it's beautiful that I get to say, well, that's okay. I sometimes just feel
Yeah.
sad and I don't know either. And
Mm.
it's okay. It doesn't mean anything. And we don't
Yeah.
have to we don't have to we don't have to have a reason to feel sad.
Yeah.
Emotions just flow
Yeah.
through us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. That is just amazing, because you're setting her up then as she goes into adulthood, when she feels like that, she won't be beating herself up for feeling like that,
That's
Yeah,
it.
or
or
trying
not
to
being able to do
find
something.
the why
Yeah.
this like
The why.
I find I do that. I'm like, why am I so sad? Okay, what is going on? And I try to like figure out where it's coming from. And sometimes it's just like feelings just come to be felt and then
Yeah.
they go and they
Yes.
don't have a reason.
Yeah.
Just to be
And
felt. That's
yeah.
it.
That's it. And the beautiful part
Oh,
is that you do have a son.
Yeah.
And eventually, when he gets to that age and he gets to
mhm.
understand what his sister, or something's happening with my sister, she's not the same as what she was 3 days ago. And why is she crying? Like, there's, the thing is that you get to explain all this to him and show him that whatever your daughter's going through is just normal, and she doesn't need a reason why she's sad, and she needs,
Mm.
this is what she needs right now from you as a brother. And he gets to grow up like my two boys, my son who's 20 and my bonus son who's 20, they are the most beautiful men around their sisters, and probably me sometimes when I just don't know and I'm crying and I maybe just shoot off down the bedroom or whatever. But they are the most, like, they don't necessarily go, oh, I know what's going on, I need to, they don't, do that. But they're not going, ew, you're on your period. Like, that we
Yeah.
boys used
Yeah.
to do that. And all of us, look, we just have this most amazing communication where they get to support the women in their life from here on in as well, and
Mm.
not make them feel like, oh God, here it comes again kind of thing. They're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, they're empathetic. They don't need to help their sisters, but they don't need to give them a hard time. They're
Yeah.
just
They
like,
don't need to make jokes. It's, yeah, really supportive environment.
yeah, absolutely.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
gorgeous. That's
This
so
was the
good.
best conversation. Thank you so
Totally.
much for coming in and having another session with us here on the Wild Roads, and really allowing us to explore this topic, because
For
it's
sure.
really important, and it's something that has, like, now that we're talking about it, I'm like, I cannot believe it has been, overlooked for so long, that
Yeah.
this is not benefiting girls at all. And
No.
the whole exam type situation at the end of the year. I mean, it doesn't work for boys and girls, but especially girls in this way as well. And I loved having this conversation. We loved having you in.
Yeah.
And we will be putting all of the details with how you can work with Elizabeth and find her on the socials into the show notes.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Oh, it's
Thank you.
been
Again.
such an incredible pleasure. Thank you so, so much. And I just hope everyone who's listened to this, they've got a few gems and they can just pass it on to their daughters and their sons. And then, slowly we'll make change. My ambition is to get to a point where I can be a change maker and start changing some of these policies, right? Some of this is all in policy. And then it will start feeding through into the workplace, because we're setting, not just about the exams as well, we're setting women up, on the back foot as they go into the workplace and to the rest of their lives. So it's all around.
Let's have some conversations with
Reconnecting
some school principals, perhaps.
Yeah.
Let's have some conversations.
There's some big changes ahead, which is exciting. So thank you so much for allowing, asking me to come on, and also giving me this platform. It's incredible, and just empowering more women out there. So thank you so much.
Thank you. We love you.
Thank you.
Wild Rose! Wild Rose!
Wild Rose.
Wow, Rose.